They thought breaking your name would break your power. Instead, it made your silence louder than their entire performance. Welcome back, my dear chosen ones. You know who you are, the ones they whispered about, laughed at, dismissed, and labeled too much because your truth rattled their illusions. Let's get one thing straight right now. It was never about you being wrong. It was always about you being right, too right for their comfort, too aware for their charade, too awake for their fake peace to survive next to your clarity. They wanted to play pretend. You showed up with reality. And now the game's over. See, when you spoke up, they called it drama. When you questioned their behavior, they called it attitude. When you refused to shrink, they called it arrogance. But you weren't doing any of that. You were simply holding a mirror to a crowd that only felt confident in the dark. You were the flashlight in a room full of actors, and baby, the truth is fluorescent. They didn't hate you because you lied. They hated you because your honesty left no shadows for their secrets to hide in. People love peace until it costs them their performance. And the minute you stopped applauding their act, they started calling you the problem. But don't get it twisted. You didn't ruin the peace. You revealed the illusion. You didn't stir chaos. You pulled the curtain on it. That's the price of authenticity. You don't have to raise your voice. Your presence alone exposes what's fake. And now, the same ones who mocked your intuition are watching their lives unravel exactly how you said they would. Not so funny now, huh? You ever notice how the people who laughed the loudest suddenly go quiet when the truth starts doing what truth does? Showing up? That silence isn't peace. It's panic. It's the sound of karma clocking in right on time. The same mouths that called you unstable are now praying you don't speak again because your words aged better than their denial. Every crazy thing you said is unfolding in front of them, and it's got them sweating in their own spotlight. My dear chosen ones, you didn't just predict the storm. You were the weather change. You brought clarity, and they called it arrogance. You brought honesty, and they called it destruction. But understand this, power doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being real. Every time you told the truth and they laughed, you planted a seed that's sprouting now, right in front of them. They thought silence would protect them from exposure, but your absence only made their lies echo louder. And let's answer the question that still haunts you. Why me? Why did I have to be the one to see it all, feel it all, call it out? Because not everyone has the stomach for reality. Most people survive off illusion. But you were built different. You were wired to see behind the curtain, to speak when it's easier to stay quiet, to confront what others worship. Being chosen doesn't mean it's easy. It means you were never meant to blend in with the noise. They tried to make you the villain in their story, but you were the plot twist they never saw coming. You didn't destroy their peace. You revealed it was never real. You didn't expose them to be cruel. You exposed them because the truth was choking you to stay silent. And now, as their masks melt under the heat of reality, you stand untouched. The proof that integrity doesn't need a defense, only time. So to every chosen one watching this, stop doubting your clarity. Stop shrinking to make liars comfortable. You were never meant to blend in with false peace. You were meant to end it. They can laugh, they can lie, they can spin their stories, but one thing they can't do is undo the truth that came out of your mouth. Because truth doesn't fade, it festers, and eventually it becomes undeniable. They laughed when you spoke. Now their lives are the punchline. And before we dive deeper, listen up, my dear chosen ones. Yeah, I'm talking to you. You've carried the truth like armor when everyone else treated it like a weapon. You've been laughed at, doubted, and underestimated, but here you are, standing solid while the ones who mocked you are unraveling in real time. That's not coincidence, that's confirmation. So if you're ready to keep shaking the table, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop A or the number 11 in the comments to claim your clarity and power right now. This isn't just another video. It's your reminder that calling out what others ignore isn't drama, it's destiny. Stick around, because we're about to break down every sign, every shift, and every moment that proves exactly why it's not so funny now. Let's get into it. Point blank. Period. Number 1. They turned your truth into a joke until reality made them the punchline. They turned your truth into a joke until life made them the punchline. Funny how they laughed the loudest when you spoke the truth, and now they flinch every time it echoes back. My dear chosen ones, remember how they chuckled when you opened your mouth? The group chats lit up with screenshots, the whispers behind your back multiplied, and the smirks became a chorus of mockery. They thought they were clever. They thought if they laughed loud enough, it would drown out your clarity. But look around now, nobody's laughing anymore, because the same truths they called drama, the same warnings they mocked as overthinking, are standing in front of them like a mirror they can't look away from. Their laughter didn't age well. It soured fast, turned bitter, and now it tastes like regret. You didn't curse them. You didn't wish them harm. You just saw. You saw the patterns, the manipulation, the energy that didn't match the words. And because you dared to name it out loud, they tried to turn you into the villain of your own story. But here's the plot twist. They're living in the mess they swore didn't exist. They're knee-deep in the chaos they once called your imagination. That's the price of denial. It always shows up uninvited, carrying your exact words as a receipt. And I know what you're thinking, chosen one. Why did they have to treat me like that? Why was my honesty such a threat? Because truth doesn't just expose lies, it exposes comfort. They built their peace on pretending, and you ripped the illusion wide open. You weren't trying to ruin their peace. You were trying to protect your sanity. But to them, honesty felt like violence, because it forced them to face everything they were running from. You were the reality check they never asked for, but desperately needed. They laughed because it was easier than changing. They mocked because it was safer than reflecting. They turned your courage into comedy because your clarity scared them more than any lie could comfort them. That's the thing about being a chosen one. You don't fit in where denial pays rent. Your voice was never the problem. Their fear of exposure was. Now the tables have turned, their jokes have expired, their funny group chats have gone silent. Every sarcastic line they threw your way is coming back to haunt them in real time. You didn't have to say, "I told you so." Life did it for you. Every cause you warned about is crashing into their world. Every consequence you predicted is showing up right on schedule, and suddenly your attitude looks a lot like accuracy. And that's what eats at them the most. You're calm. You're not bitter. You're not gloating. You're just existing, unbothered, while they sit in the ruins of their own arrogance. That silence that once felt isolating for you. It's their turn to taste it now. They're learning what it feels like when laughter becomes a ghost, when truth becomes unavoidable, when the crazy one was just the one who saw clearly. So, my chosen ones, hold your head high. Let their regret be the applause you never needed. You didn't lose when they laughed. You won when the truth stood tall without your defense. They turned your words into a joke, but life turned their arrogance into a lesson. And now, without a script or a stage, they're realizing the hardest punchline of all. You were never the joke. They were. Number 2, you didn't break their world. You exposed the lie it was built on. You didn't just tell the truth. You short-circuited their entire illusion. They called it peace until you stopped pretending with them. Then suddenly, truth became chaos. My dear chosen ones, you didn't just speak up. You detonated the quiet lie everyone agreed to protect. You weren't fighting one person. You were exposing a network of fake smiles, unspoken deals, and silent cover-ups that fed off each other. You cracked the code of their ecosystem, the one that only works if everyone plays dumb. The rule was simple. Keep pretending. Pretend we're all fine. Pretend it's love. Pretend it's peace. But you refused. You looked that false harmony dead in the face and said, "No, this is not peace. This is performance." And just like that, the illusions started to collapse. They were never mad because you lied. They were mad because you told the truth too clearly, because you didn't whisper it. You said it out loud. And when you do that, it's not just a statement, it's a threat. Your words didn't just expose a person, they disrupted a whole structure built on comfort and control. That's why they panicked. You broke the social contract that said, "We'll all stay quiet so nobody has to grow." You broke the code, and that made you dangerous. They could have handled one argument, one disagreement. But you turned the lights on in the entire room. That workplace where everyone knows who's toxic but acts like it's normal, you ruined the act. That family where keeping the peace really means don't talk about the dysfunction, you called it out. That friend circle built on gossip and trauma bonding, you made it impossible for them to hide behind fake loyalty anymore. You didn't destroy anything. You revealed what was already broken. And yes, they labeled you difficult. They said you were doing too much. But tell me, chosen one, who else had the guts to stop pretending? You weren't being dramatic. You were being awake. They needed you to play blind so their comfort could survive, but you were never built for silence. You were the interruption they didn't see coming, the glitch in their social code that made all their pretty lies start glitching too. Now they're spiraling, not because you attacked them, but because you made pretending impossible. The masks are cracking, the roles don't fit, and the energy in the room shifted, all because you told the truth. You didn't just shake a person, you shook a system, and that's why they'll never forget you. Not because you were loud, but because your clarity was the earthquake they'll never recover from. Number 3, you weren't their enemy, you were their reflection, and they couldn't stand the view. You weren't the weapon, you were the mirror they couldn't stand to face. The truth doesn't stab, it reflects. It's not the blade that cuts them, it's their own reflection that finally draws blood. My dear chosen ones, you didn't come swinging. You didn't come to destroy anyone. You simply existed, clear, honest, and unfiltered, and that alone exposed more than 1,000 arguments ever could. Your presence made their mask slip without you saying a single word. You didn't call them out with anger. You called them out by being real. That's the part that shattered them. You didn't play their game, and that made them realize they never had the control they thought they did. See, when you walk into a room as your authentic self, people built on illusion feel it like heat. They start sweating behind their smiles. They call you too much, too blunt, or too deep. But that's just their fear talking. What they really mean is, you see me too clearly. And clarity is a threat in a world built on pretending. They tried to label you unstable because they couldn't label you controllable. They tried to twist your honesty into hostility because that's how they protect their image. But you weren't attacking them. You were reflecting them. You showed them the truth about their own bitterness, jealousy, and manipulation. You didn't shout, you didn't prove, you didn't beg, you just were. And that unfiltered energy, that calm awareness, it was more exposing than any confrontation could ever be. Think about it. Mirrors don't judge, they just reflect. And yet, for some people, that's unbearable. They don't want to see their real face. They want to see the version they rehearsed. And when you held up that reflection, when you simply stood in your truth, they panicked. You became the villain in their story, not because you were wrong, but because you made them see what they'd spent years avoiding. And now, their denial is cracking. The The same people who once said you're overreacting are now living out the very drama they accused you of inventing. That's what happens when truth shows up. It doesn't knock, it breaks the door down. They're spiraling, not because you hurt them, but because they're finally seeing themselves without your silence to soften the blow. So, chosen ones, understand this. You were never the weapon, you were the reflection, and in a world addicted to filters, being real is revolutionary. They didn't fear your anger, they feared your accuracy. You didn't expose them, you just refused to lie for them. And now their biggest enemy isn't you, it's the mirror you left behind. Number 4, your realness cracked the mask they spent years perfecting. You shattered their costume, and now they don't know who they are without the mask. They spent years building an image for the crowd. Then you showed up and turned on the lights. My dear chosen ones, you didn't just enter their world, you exposed the performance they called a personality. They had the script memorized, every humble brag, every fake moral, every carefully timed display of emotion. They rehearsed how to sound deep, how to look kind, how to appear confident. They were addicted to the applause of perception. But you walked in unfiltered, no script, no act, just pure presence. And that authenticity hit them like a truth bomb they couldn't defuse. They've been living on stage so long they forgot who they were off it. Every word they said, every value they flaunted was part of an identity designed to be liked, not lived. And then came you, the one who didn't need the spotlight to feel real. You didn't compete, you didn't play the same game, you just were. And that terrified them, because when someone truly real stands next to someone pretending, the difference is undeniable. Their mask started slipping before they even noticed it was cracking. And now, behind closed doors, they're spiraling. Every time they post something online, it feels hollow. Every compliment feels fake. Every "I'm fine" sounds like an echo. Because once they've been seen by someone who sees through, it's impossible to go back to pretending. You didn't attack them, you triggered the part of them they've been running from, the empty space behind their image. You didn't break their identity. You revealed that it was never real. You want to know why they treated you like the villain? Because your authenticity made their act collapse. You didn't have to call them out, they felt it just standing next to you. Your calm confidence made their forced self-love look like an Instagram filter. Nice from a distance, pixelated up close. You're the walking reminder that real doesn't need performance, that peace doesn't need an audience. Now they flinch when your name comes up, not because you hurt them, but because you unmasked them. They feel exposed even in rooms you're not in. They scroll through their curated life, wondering when the applause stopped feeling like validation and started sounding like noise. That's the power of being a chosen one. You don't just reveal lies, you strip away illusion. You didn't ruin their life, you ruined their disguise. And now, the only thing left for them to face is the truth you carry effortlessly. When the mask falls, the mirror stays. Number 5. They called it arrogance until the facts lined up behind your clarity. They mistook your vision for arrogance, but reality just proved your point. Funny how confidence looks like ego to people still lying to themselves. My dear chosen ones, they never had a problem with your intelligence. They had a problem with your accuracy. You saw too much, too fast, too clearly, and that terrified them. Your intuition cut through their illusions like glass. And instead of asking how you knew, they decided to call you arrogant. Because that's what people do when they can't keep up. They insult what they don't understand. They couldn't grasp how you connected dots they didn't even see on the page. So they labeled you dramatic, paranoid, too deep. But your clarity wasn't noise, it was signal. You weren't trying to be superior. You were simply tired of pretending not to notice the obvious. You weren't speaking from ego, you were speaking from experience, You've seen enough patterns to recognize a cycle before it completes. While they needed evidence, you needed awareness. You weren't guessing, you were observing. You didn't need validation to trust what you knew was off. And that kind of clarity, chosen one, threatens people whose entire identity depends on being the smartest one in the room. They couldn't stand the idea that your quiet understanding outshined their loud performance. So they tried to shrink you. They whispered behind your back, told others you thought you were better than everyone, as if confidence in your own discernment was arrogance. But here's the punchline. Now that the storm has hit, every single thing you saw is standing in front of them, undeniable and unfiltered. The very people who called you cocky are scrambling for answers to the same questions you asked months ago. You didn't need revenge, you just needed time. Because truth doesn't argue, it ages well. Now they're choking on their own dismissal. Every warning they ignored, every insight they mocked, is echoing in real time. You're not saying, "I told you so." You don't have to. Life's doing it for you, louder than words ever could. Your so-called ego was just emotional intelligence they weren't ready for. Your attitude was awareness. And your arrogance, that was the calm of someone who knows what's coming because they've seen it before. So, chosen one, don't ever dim your insight to make the blind comfortable. Let them call it arrogance if they need to. Time will always flip the narrative. You were never trying to be better. You were just brave enough to see. And now that reality has caught up, your clarity isn't arrogance. It's prophecy fulfilled, point blank, period. Number 6. You named the quiet manipulation no one else had the nerve to see. You made the invisible abuse visible, and that's what shattered their control. They called it love because control sounds ugly out loud. My dear chosen ones, this is where the tables truly turned. You didn't just speak truth. You named the kind of cruelty that hides behind smiles, handshakes, and "I was just joking." You saw the manipulation that wore politeness like perfume. You caught the guilt trips disguised as affection. You noticed how concern was just a leash in disguise. You saw through the emotional chess game that everyone else was too afraid to even admit existed. And when you said it out loud, calmly, clearly, without theatrics, you did the one thing their entire power system couldn't survive. You made it visible. Understand this, chosen one. People like that don't depend on strength. They depend on secrecy. Their power doesn't come from being respected. It comes from being protected by silence. As long as everyone pretends not to notice, they win. As long as people keep saying that's just how they are, they thrive. But you broke that unspoken agreement. You shattered the illusion by saying the quiet part out loud. This isn't love, this is control. You didn't need bruises to call it what it was. You didn't wait for shouting to label it harm. You saw the violence in the way they used silence like punishment. You caught the control hidden in, "I'm only doing this because I care." You saw the power play behind every fake apology and conditional kindness. And when you stopped playing along, the whole house of cards they'd built started to collapse. The moment you refused to laugh off the jokes, when you stopped rewarding manipulation with patience, when you drew a boundary they couldn't bulldoze, everything they'd built on denial started trembling. Their control relied on your silence. Their image depended on your cooperation. The moment you withdrew it, they lost both. That's why they panicked. That's why they turned the narrative, painted you as cold, cruel, ungrateful. Because exposure burns when you've lived your whole life in the shade. They thought their roles and reputations would protect them. That's just how parents are. He's the leader. She means well. But you saw the pattern behind the titles. You saw how fear had replaced respect, how exhaustion was rebranded as loyalty, and once you called it out, no one could unsee it. You didn't destroy them, chosen one. You destroyed the illusion they ruled from. Now the silence that once protected them is haunting them. Their control stopped working because you pulled the curtain, and light doesn't negotiate with darkness. Remember this: you didn't break the peace. You revealed it was never real. You didn't expose them to the world. You exposed them to themselves, and that's what truly broke them. Number 7, you became the living archive of everything they swore never happened. You became the archive they can't delete. They thought your silence meant amnesia. Turns out you were just documenting the evidence in peace. My dear chosen ones, this part right here is for the ones who remember everything they tried to bury. You, the witness they couldn't erase, the living archive of every lie, every performance, every that never happened moment they thought would dissolve with time. You didn't just live through the dysfunction, they made you the historian of it. While they were busy rewriting the story, you were keeping the original version, word for word, scene by scene. Not because you wanted revenge, but because your mind doesn't let go of truth. That's what separates you from them. They move on by pretending. You move on by remembering. They thought time would clean the slate. They thought smiling in public would wash away what they did in private. But your memory, it's their unfinished chapter. They fear you because you don't need to lie to look good. You don't even need to speak. You exist, and that's enough to expose them. Every fake apology, every backhanded comment, every betrayal wrapped in love and concern, you remember it all. You're not holding grudges, you're holding data, and data doesn't lie. You see, chosen ones don't forget because forgetting would mean betraying themselves. You remember not to hurt, but to understand, and that understanding is their undoing. Because while they were performing growth, you were actually healing. While they were rebranding as changed, you were processing the truth with receipts. They call you too sensitive or obsessed with the past because your awareness threatens their illusion of innocence. If you remember, their mask doesn't work. If you speak, their story collapses. And deep down, they know it. That's why they downplay you, mock your emotions, or claim you took it the wrong way. It's not about how you remember. It's that you remember at all. You are the glitch in their narrative, the unedited footage of what really went down. You are proof that no amount of pretending can outlast accountability. So don't shrink when they call you stuck. You're not stuck. You're precise. You're not bitter. You're awake. You don't live in the past. You live with the truth. They may have the stage, but you have the record. And records don't fade. They resurface exactly when the world starts asking questions. So, my chosen ones, keep standing tall. Let them perform amnesia. You carry reality. You are the receipt that time can't burn, the memory that fake apologies can't overwrite. And that's why they're spiraling, because no matter how they twist it, you're still here, holding the truth they can't afford to forget. Number 8. Your voice didn't echo. It detonated their entire narrative. Your voice wasn't noise, it was the verdict that ended their act. They mistook your truth for drama, but it was the sound of the walls closing in on their own lies. My dear chosen ones, remember when they said you were overreacting, when they rolled their eyes every time you called out the manipulation hiding behind fake smiles. They wanted to believe your voice was just emotion, just noise, just another moment. But what they didn't realize is that your words carried weight, the kind that doesn't need volume to hit like thunder. You weren't ranting, you were revealing. You weren't bitter, you were breaking a pattern. You didn't want revenge, you just wanted peace, and peace can't exist in rooms built on lies. They thought they could talk circles around you. Thought if they spun the story fast enough, they could make everyone dizzy with confusion. But your voice? It cut through the spin like glass through fabric. You didn't have to yell, you didn't have to prove a thing. You simply named what others tiptoed around. The games, the gaslighting, the guilt trips. And suddenly, everything they used to control the narrative started slipping. Because once truth is spoken out loud, it starts working on its own. You weren't trying to destroy them. You were just done being quiet. You were done swallowing discomfort just to keep the peace that only existed if you lied too. And that's the real reason everything shifted the moment you spoke. You didn't change the energy. You revealed it. Your voice was the light switch in a dark room, and the roaches scattered. Chosen ones, here's what they'll never admit. Your silence used to be their shield. As long as you stayed quiet, their image stayed spotless. But the moment you broke that silence, the truth didn't just echo, it detonated. Their charm stopped working. Their manipulation lost power. The mask that once fooled everyone started slipping in public. And now, every word you ever said sounds like a headline they can't outrun. And no, it's not karma in some distant future. It's cause and effect happening in real time. You didn't curse them, you just pulled the curtain and the performance fell apart. Your voice became the verdict. It wasn't gossip, it wasn't petty. It was the end of the illusion. You didn't raise your hand in anger, you simply told the truth, and life did the rest. Now they're left scrambling for control that no longer exists, trying to patch a reputation that can't be revived. You didn't have to destroy anything, their lies did that for you. The moment you spoke, it stopped being a debate. It became a reality check, not a conversation, a conclusion, case closed. Number 9. They didn't need you wrong, they needed you silent. They needed your silence like oxygen because your truth made their lie suffocate. They didn't block you because you were wrong. They blocked you because every word you spoke threatened the little fantasy they built on borrowed confidence. My dear chosen ones, you were never silenced for being loud. You were silenced for being accurate. The moment you started connecting dots they swore didn't exist, the room shifted. You felt it, didn't you? That weird tension in the air when you said something that hit too close to home. That side eye, that fake laugh, that awkward, "you're overthinking it." They didn't reject your truth because it was wrong. They rejected it because it made them see what they'd been avoiding for years. You weren't their problem, you were their mirror. And when people live off illusions, even clarity feels like violence. You saw the pattern before the performance ended. You caught the motive before the move. While they were celebrating surface peace, you were reading the undercurrent. You noticed how their tone didn't match their words, how their concern felt like control, how their jokes were just disguised insults. That awareness made you a threat, not because you were trying to expose anyone, but because your presence alone made pretense impossible. You were the quiet truth in a room addicted to noise. They didn't exile you to punish you. They did it to protect their illusion. Your voice was too crisp for their echo chamber. They needed silence to keep their script running, to keep everyone believing the same recycled story. But you refused to play dumb, refused to bow to comfort, refused to gaslight yourself into pretending it was all fine. That's when the walls started closing in. Because when a lie depends on collective pretending, one honest person becomes chaos. You didn't attack anyone's character, you just stopped participating in their fiction, and that alone made everything crumble. Without your silence cushioning their egos, their narratives fell apart like wet paper. They're spiraling now, not because you hurt them, but because you stopped protecting their image. You didn't destroy their reputation, their own behavior did. You just stopped covering it up. Chosen ones, understand this. Your clarity is not arrogance, it's awareness. You don't need to prove it, argue it, or apologize for it. They didn't fear your voice because it was loud. They feared it because it was undeniable. So when they try to erase your name, remember this: you don't silence truth. You only delay its echo. And now, that echo is shaking every wall they built. Number 10, you survived storms that would have buried them. And that's what terrifies them now. They watched you walk through fire, and now they're choking on the smoke. They prayed for your downfall, but you built your foundation from the ashes. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about that look in their eyes, the one they give you now, that mix of shock and fear they can't quite explain. They watched you walk through storms they couldn't survive. They saw the betrayal, the loss, the public humiliation, and they waited for the collapse. They were counting on your silence, betting on your breakdown. But you didn't fold. You evolved. You rose from the ruins they left you in, not as a victim, but as living proof that resilience isn't built in comfort, it's built in chaos. They didn't expect this version of you. They expected the broken one, the apologetic one, the maybe they were right one. But here you are, clear-eyed, unbothered, and 10 times stronger than the mess they tried to bury you under. And that right there, that's what haunts them. Because your existence now exposes the weakness in their entire performance. They tried to destroy your credibility, but all they really did was build your character arc. You're the plot twist they didn't see coming. You ever notice how they flinch when your name comes up? That's not guilt, it's exposure. Because your survival rewrote their script. They had a whole story planned where you were supposed to crumble, and they got to play the role of the concerned one, the innocent one, the one who tried to help. But you didn't give them that ending. You refused to die in the version of the story they wrote for you. And when you kept standing, the lie started shaking. They called you dramatic. They called you unstable. But let's be honest, they were terrified of your strength, because your ability to keep showing up, to rebuild yourself without asking permission, reminded them of everything they lack. Your resilience became a mirror, and what they saw staring back wasn't you. It was their own fragility. You're not the ghost of their past. You're the proof of their limits. They can't rewrite what you've lived through. They can't edit out the receipts of your recovery. Every scar they caused is now a spotlight, illuminating the truth they spent years hiding. And the louder you live, the quieter their lies become. That's the power of endurance. It exposes the fraud in fake power. So, my chosen ones, understand this. Your strength isn't just survival. It's sabotage to every false story told about you. You took the narrative they twisted and you flipped it like a switch. You didn't just heal, you dismantled their illusion. You are their consequence, walking and breathing, reminding them every day that control doesn't last forever. And now, every step you take is another crack in their kingdom of lies. They watched you endure what would have ended them. Now they're learning that resilience isn't loud, it's lethal. Number 11. You reclaimed the story, and their power collapsed with the lie. You took back the narrative, and their illusion crumbled in real time. They built their reputation on your silence. The day you started talking, their empire started shaking. My dear chosen ones, this is the part they never thought would happen. The moment you stopped living in the version of reality they wrote for you. For so long, they told your story for you. They painted you as the problem, the one who changed, the one who overreacted. They twisted conversations, manipulated perceptions, and convinced everyone that their lie was the truth. But then something shifted. You stopped defending yourself. You stopped chasing validation. You simply started being seen for who you are. And that alone broke the spell. Taking back your perception wasn't rebellion, it was strategy. You reclaimed the microphone they used to narrate your character. And the second you did, the world started seeing the cracks in their performance. The gossip fell flat. The manipulation stopped landing. The smear campaigns lost their audience. Why? Because you stopped playing along. You decided to stand tall in your truth. No filter, no performance, no apologies. That's the moment their control began to collapse, because their power depended on you staying quiet. Think about it, chosen one. Their whole system thrived on illusion. As long as they could convince people that you were unstable, they looked stable. As long as they could make you question yourself, they stayed untouchable. But when you started telling your story with clarity instead of pain, the mask slipped. The people who once believed their version started noticing the inconsistencies. The same audience they used to perform for began to see through the act. And now, the applause is gone. The whispers don't hit like they used to. Their control is evaporating because truth doesn't need marketing. It just needs a moment of honesty. You didn't drag them. You didn't expose them with vengeance. You just lived authentically. You stopped hiding behind the shame they handed you, and suddenly, their entire identity lost gravity. They can't handle that. They're spiraling because the spotlight they used to manipulate others is now shining on them, and it's not flattering. Every lie they told about you is aging like bad milk. Every attempt to discredit you is collapsing under your calm confidence. So hear me clearly, chosen one. The moment you took back how people see you, you dismantled their illusion brick by brick. They can no longer control your narrative because you own it now. You are the author, the narrator, and the truth in motion. And that's what scares them most. Your piece is louder than their performance. And that right there, my chosen ones, is the full circle moment. The one they never saw coming. The truth stood tall, time did its job, and now every lie they told is turning to dust. You didn't destroy them. You simply stopped feeding their illusion, and the silence that follows your piece is louder than their entire performance ever was. So hold your head high, because you didn't just survive. You shifted the whole energy of the room. If this message hit where it needed to, don't just watch and scroll past. Own it. Hit that like button, subscribe for more truth that cuts through the noise, and drop 77 in the comments to claim your power back right now. Share this with someone who's tired of being misunderstood and ready to stand in their truth. Period. Your voice matters. Your presence is power. And this is just the beginning.